Okay.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
All right. Well, it's official. We're recording. So thank you. Yeah, just right in the midst of me expressing gratitude, Genevieve, for you to take time out of your day and stop in to have a conversation with me. I am just ecstatic about that. My name is Bianca, and I am the creator and the host of the Uni Podcast, which is the platform that we're on right now. I'm also creator of this movement, the brand Reach In Now, out of Reach In Now University. And basically what my jam is I love talking to people, connecting with people, talking about a subject called mental fitness. And I've got a lot of passion. My life's journey is kind of taking me from pain to purpose, and the purpose of helping others navigate, the struggles, the struggles that we all experience, that none of us are exempt from, struggles that range from anxiety and depression. And then as we get into kind of end stages, ultimately it's my mission in life to contribute to suicide prevention for the world. And so to avoid being kind of labeled as the suicide lady, to always be talking about things that are doom and gloom. I'd like to start off conversations with clarifying that for people, that I don't have to say the word suicide in order to do suicide prevention. I don't talk about death every day. I actually talk about life and finding ways collectively as a community, and from top down and from leaders on down, finding ways that we could live life more healthy, and achieve kind of that peace and higher consciousness and happiness. So when it was introduced to me, the idea of talking with you, I was so excited, especially after seeing your series, Stuck in a Rut. And I've been dying to ask you, how were you inspired to start that series? How did you come up with that idea? And whose idea was it for you to film the series from your bed? I thought that was genius, just comfortable, intimate, relaxed conversations, and you making it just like it was so easy, for people to come in and talk to you. So I'll stop blabbering and I'll let you kind of talk about that. Let's talk about Stuck in a Rut.
Sounds good. First of all, I just want to say you have the most delightful energy ever. And so I could listen to you talk about anything, whether it's death or suicide, and I'd be enlightened at the end of it, just so you know. So, so Stuck in a Rut. Yeah. So I obviously had my own struggles. And the one thing I think a lot of us don't really understand is like what it looks like on the outside for somebody isn't what they're experiencing on the inside.
Yes.
And it's very easy for us to compare our inner workings with someone else's outside and not take into account that either their lives aren't as easy as they appear to be, or that we're all kind of struggling. And within our struggle, although our struggle is unique to us, we're not alone in our struggles.
Right.
Which is so important, because oftentimes I think when you are someone who is depressed or grieving or struggling in some capacity, the first thing you want to do is isolate, because you don't kind of want to interact with other people. And so the idea for doing Stuck in a Rut in the bed was, if you're depressed, you can't get out of bed. So I thought, well, if anyone's having any kind of problems, the bed is the place you want to chat, because, I thought it was fun, and it was a nice way to kind of catch people's attention at the start of the show. But so for me, I've struggled for many years with depression, and I had a lot of grief in my life. I lost my mom at a very young age, and it was a big impact on my life. It changed everything, because I think when a young girl loses their mother, they lose guidance in the world. And oftentimes it can feel like you're a rowboat in the ocean without any paddles.
Yeah.
And I was obviously lucky enough to come across some incredible people that helped me along the way. But just the exploratory journey of going from that really dark place just in my life, going through these trials and tribulations, and then coming out on the other end and realizing how many people are hurting themselves because of what they think they see versus what is.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to get the message out.
Well, what an incredible incredible way to send that message. Like you said, when someone is feeling depressed, it's hard to get out of bed, you know, and I relate this to kind of the formation of our brand, Reach In Now. I was at a funeral service, and this was a suicide death funeral service, and a family member stood up and talked to all in attendance and said, why do we continue to wait for people to reach out? It is so hard when you're feeling depressed, when you're feeling stressed and anxious, to reach out, to know that you're in crisis until those symptoms have become unmanageable, you know? And so uh, to wait for people that are having a hard time getting out of bed to reach out and say, hey, I need some help, and then to go into an office and talk to somebody in a skirt suit or a pantsuit about all of their problems and past, that's not reasonable. It's not a reasonable ask for the community. And so bringing those conversations right to someone's bedroom, to me, is an incredible genius idea, and it shows, especially coming from you. And I want to touch on this. You know, I know who you are, and I'm sure that a lot of our listeners know who you are, but I just want to state the obvious, you know, and probably what a lot of us are thinking. For you being an international phenomenon, model, voted sexiest woman in the world, like on the planet, you know, for you to come forward and say, I've experienced depression. I've experienced these responses to tragic loss and grief. And I'm human. For you to say that you're human and again bring those conversations right to the bedroom, to me, it's remarkable. I also know that it couldn't have been easy. So can you talk about how hard was it for you to come forward? To me, it's almost like coming out of a different type of closet, right? Like, and saying, hey, I'm human.
Well, there's two parts to it. You know, when you're in the public eye, you want people to only see the best of you, because that's the whole point. The idea of what a model is someone who you think you might want to live your life like. Like, you buy toothpaste, you see the person's got nice shiny teeth, you go, I want those teeth.
Yeah.
So to come back and go, oh, well, by the way, just so you know, just behind the curtain, I've been crying the whole time, it's a difficult thing to do. And to kind of admit that to the people around you who also don't want to see what's going on. And you mentioned, going into an office and talking to a therapist or whatever, the reality is like, if you really are depressed, sometimes you just can't actually do those things that need to be done. And so what I realized with the show was that if you Google, what do I do for anxiety? Or you search, what do I do for depression? There's a lot of really unhelpful tips that quite frankly don't work. And when you really get into the nitty gritty of things, I mean, there are very good practical things if you find out from someone who's really experienced it, what you can actually do to help yourself. Since Stuck in a Rut, I actually, because we filmed that a few years ago now, but I decided to go and become a grief recovery specialist.
Wow.
So I did the grief recovery training, and then during coronavirus, I did it's called advanced grief recovery, so that I would be able to take people through the process online. And I usually only work with people on referral, or if they are just a friend, because I realized that a lot of people don't want to deal with what's underlying.
Right.
And, you mentioned the funeral that you went to, and I'm sorry for your loss. But what happens is that we're not taught as a society how to deal with the perceived negative emotions. We think that what we're supposed to have is only the good ones. Right. If I'm just positive and upbeat, then I'm considered good and righteous and moral. And the reality is that that's not what the human experience is. The reaction to death or loss, and there's over 40 different types of loss, is grief. And it's completely normal. And I think, we're taught the wrong message. Sorry, I've got two cats and they're suddenly going crazy on the table. You guys, stop it. They're the best. Now that's something you want to cure your grief, get a cat. Um, so I was saying, so there's over 40 different types of loss, and we're not really told how to deal with it. So from a young child, we're kind of taught the wrong method. So the idea will be, you have a goldfish and your goldfish dies. And your parents go to you and they say, well, don't worry, Bianca, we're going to get you another goldfish. And at the time, you're like, okay, that makes sense. I lose something, I replace something. But the reality is you can't replace the loss. You can't replace some things. And what the right thing to do is to hold space for a person's feelings and to listen to them and say, thank you for sharing. And I hear you and I see you and I acknowledge you for your struggles. And you don't have to provide someone the solution. Sometimes people just need to say something.
Right.
And I realized that people just want to be heard at the end of the day.
Yeah. No, great examples just about replacing, and that brought up a thought for me. Nowadays with advanced technology, we have that same kind of concept of replacing what we've lost. But now we can replace it with something that's artificial and virtual, and it doesn't necessarily have to be or mean that it's authentic, and so now we've got people that have these spiritual losses or emotional losses, and they're replacing it with this identity that may not be authentically, true to who they are, or may not authentically reflect their realities. So then you've got people that are constantly, like you mentioned before, kind of comparing themselves to this unrealistic version, of themselves, or of other people's lives and things. So yeah, I mean, I would just imagine, especially as we're maybe talking to and reaching younger people, that this is increasingly difficult, for us as a human race, that how do we learn to deal with loss without automatically trying to replace, and then on top of that, automatically replacing with something that isn't real or authentic at all,
Right.
And yeah, I mean, if you've got some thoughts on that, I'd love to hear.
Well, I think, so there's so many different reasons why we there's many different kind of award, someone says to you, like, how are you coping? You've lost something, you've had a breakup. Then they'll say to you, well, aren't you over it yet?
Right.
So they don't give you the time to grieve. And the reality is that also, grief and loss can compound over time. So let's say, for example, I have a breakup and then I decide to start replacing my loss either with another person or with addictive behavior. So that could be, checking out online with social media or with dating apps or whatever else. Maybe it's watching too much TV or whatever it could be. And there's so many different things that we do, even things that we do which we would think are good, but are kind of just checking out mechanisms, like maybe reading too much or, going to the gym excessively or whatever the case may be. We do these kinds of behaviors to try and avoid dealing with the feelings, because the idea of dealing with the feelings, we think that if we open the can of worms, we're going to be sad, depressed, or grieving forever, that we'll never stop crying. But the reality is that's just not true. It's not true. It's not true at all. And there are a lot of tools available. And what makes the world we live in right now so incredible is that there is so much information about these things available. Yeah. There's YouTube shows, there's this podcast, there is Stuck in a Rut, there is online counseling and all these different things. But I think the idea of kind of going, I'm not broken just because I'm grieving. I'm not broken because I'm depressed. I'm not broken because the life I'm living in, I'm not happy living in.
Right.
Like, you're not broken. You're just going through something. And there's nothing wrong with going on medication if you need to go on medication, and I think that's really important, to take that stigma away, but also to realize that medication and things like that aren't the solution either, because that's just a band-aid to what's really going on.
Absolutely.
And at the end of the day, we have to face ourselves. We have to face our truth, and we have to be okay with all the spectrum of the feelings, the sad ones, the angry ones, the losses that we faced. I think the pandemic as well is a massive worldwide grief event. And
Mhm.
we're all trying to just come to terms with the idea of what we thought our lives were going to be and what's kind of been taken away from us. The events, the family events that we've missed, the
Mhm.
milestones that we wanted to hit. Maybe it's the relationship we haven't gotten yet. And
Mhm.
and I think it's depressing for a lot of us. And I think taking control of it and going, you know what, I acknowledge that this is what's going on with me, and
Mhm.
I'm going to do something about it is vital. Because if you don't do anything about it and you suffer in silence, in the end of the day, it's like you're suffering alone, and it's not a pleasant place to be. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's just kind of what's in my mind.
No, absolutely. I think that you articulated it beautifully, and also you're touching on points that I was curious about with you specifically. How do you manage your depression? Because I think the largest misconception is, especially with the medical model nowadays, is that you get treatment and you're cured from any type
Mhm.
of dis-ease, and I think with depression and anxiety and stress, it's a little bit different than that. There is no, you're just cured, or you take medication and all of a sudden you're happy and you never respond that way to any type of event. um, Mental health, and again, tying it back into the subject of mental fitness, it takes a daily practice or devotion to manage your mental health in order to remain healthy. I mean, there's
Right.
maintenance that's involved. It's not just an easy fix.
Well, I always say, for me personally, based on my makeup, if you will, the way I am, I wake up 5 or 6 steps behind everybody with my mental health. I don't wake up at neutral. I almost always wake up not feeling good.
Hmm.
I almost always have to set my day up. So there's several steps I have to take in the morning just to get to neutral.
Yeah.
And accepting that and taking those small actions makes a huge difference. Of course, I can play the victim role. Anybody can play the victim. Oh, poor me. I have all
Mhm.
these problems. Well, my life's not going well because I've got all these problems. But at some point, a person has to take responsibility and go, okay,
Yeah.
I want to live so much that I'm willing to go to any lengths to get that mental fitness.
Mhm.
So that can come in the form of, there's many things. There's this a spiritual aspect to things, turning your life over to a kind of higher power, if that's what you believe.
Mhm.
um, there is community, communicating with people that are experiencing the same things as you, that you can share honestly with and say, hey, this is where I'm at. I don't need you to do anything about that. I just want you to know that this is where I'm at. Sometimes is so helpful, just to halve the problem, just to take that weight away from you. And then yeah, I mean, I read a lot of spiritual books, a lot of self-help books. I want to get to the bottom of my traumas, not because I want to blame my past, but because I find it fascinating that my motivations in life can often stem from something that I didn't even realize was affecting me in today.
Right.
So I've started a couple of weeks ago. I started a fitness program called B2B Body, which I'm sure you saw online, and I'm launching an app for it in probably about 3 weeks' time.
Uh-huh.
But I was working out recently. I've come to Nashville for a while, and I joined the gym here, and I found a new workout partner. His name's Lucas. He's fantastic. And we kind of encourage each other, and he's on a weight loss journey. And he said to me that he wants to get six pack by summer.
Uh-huh.
And he said, what's your goal? And I said, I don't have a goal. And then I thought about it for about 5 minutes, and I said to him, you know what I really want to do is I want to get off my medication.
Hmm.
That's my goal.
Yeah.
I want to, by the end of the year, be medication free and depression free.
Mhm.
Because the reality is that working out does help. Your physical exercise does help. And then the more you feel good about yourself physically, the easier it is to feel good about yourself mentally.
Mhm.
So showing up every day to the gym, making a choice and going, you know what? I love myself so much that
Mhm.
I'm willing to do what it takes to keep my body healthy. And that makes me have self esteem about why I'm showing up in the world.
Mhm, mhm.
And so I realized, there's so many, everybody's focused on certain types of things as a goal of like weight loss. How can you look? If you just look good, then you'll feel great. Well, I have newsflash for you. I've looked amazing and felt terrible.
Yeah.
And the reality is like, that's my goal. My goal is to do whatever it takes to get depression free. And even this conversation is part of that, I think.
Oh, that is so amazing. And I love how you tied the physical fitness into the mental fitness. And I love that because so many conversations that I have, people think so one dimensionally, they think if I have a physical injury, then I could only repair that and heal from that physically, and not really, thinking about if I have a physical injury, that it impacts me psychologically and spiritually, which you brought up. It's the same thing for injury and trauma in all of those dimensions, right? If I have a spiritual trauma, people, a lot of times we overlook the impacts that a spiritual trauma has on our psyche and on our physical body, and how it manifests into our self-care regimen. And so I love, that you bring up the different aspects, and using physical exercise to be a part of healing maybe some spiritual and psychological dis-ease or trauma, like as in the depression. So I
Right.
love that.
Well, this is the thing. It's you have to have a holistic approach to your health. I genuinely believe that, because let's think about it. Let's say I'm feeling a bit emotional. Okay. The first thing I might do is reach for a snack. Then I reach for a snack. Then I don't feel good because now I don't physically feel good because I probably didn't eat the healthy snack. Let's get
Right.
real. I probably ate the bad snack. Then I feel guilty for eating the bad snack.
Mhm.
My body doesn't feel good physically. Then I punish myself mentally for doing something I think I shouldn't have done.
Mhm.
Then it becomes a vicious cycle. Then my self-esteem takes a hit. Then it goes down the road of like, well, of course you don't deserve to do this or deserve to have that or deserve to have a good life because look at you.
Mhm.
So that's kind of my thought process. And I'm sure that sounds a little loopy, but that's where it goes for me. And I think a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah.
And so through the process of training as a model to be physically fit, I noticed in the beginning of my career, I would train with a kind of mindset that was punishing and nasty to myself.
Mhm.
And I would say to myself things like when I was working out, like, well, if you had a body like that girl, then you would have the job. Because you don't. Now here you are working out for however long I was working out. And the reality is I was driving my spirit into the ground.
Mhm. Yeah.
And as soon as I change my mindset about why I'm doing things, why am I working out? Well, I'm working out because I know that it's good for my body. I know that it's going to help me to have vitality, longevity. It's going to help my bone density increase. It's going to give me some much needed serotonin and dopamine. It's going to give me community if I'm willing to speak up and speak to the people around me. And that just ricochets into every other area. Now I'm being a little bit more assertive at work. And as your circumstances change, it's much easier to overcome your depression, because the reality is we might, you know, what makes a person depressed? They're dissatisfied with the life they're living. There's
Yeah.
a chemical imbalance sometimes as well, most of the time.
Mhm.
And you can't just treat the chemical and expect your life to suddenly be a different life, because that's just not how it works. But you can't treat your life and then expect the chemical to balance itself
Mhm.
out. So it really is, it kind of reminds me of that childhood song where you go heads, shoulders, knees
Yeah.
and toes. And that's how I feel about like a holistic approach, is you really got to tap at every single aspect of your life and be consistent with it all the time, which sounds like a lot of work, but I personally think it's worth it, because, then you're living your best life and you can actually do stuff.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just me lying in bed watching Frasier all day. I mean, I love Frasier, but
Right, right. Well, so you mentioned earlier that you found a workout partner, and to me, that kind of highlights what I believe to be an important part of this process, and that's, like you mentioned, community, connecting to community. having a sense of belonging, because also, as you mentioned, isolation is one of those key symptoms, right? Of that something may not be right. It's a key symptom of depression is when we isolate, and that dis-ease kind of advances into some more serious things. And so when you mentioned that you found a workout partner, I thought, oh, that's a great point, is surrounding yourself by other people that also have goals, that are also active in kind of what would be like a recovery, like trauma or grief recovery. And can you speak to that a little bit more? Just how important is it to connect with other people? How do you identify who are the right people to connect to? And then also kind of capping that off with mentorship, how do you forge a mentorship relationship with those people that you're connected with?
Let's see. Okay, so I don't know if I mentioned before, I am sober. So I am in a 12-step program as well, which
Awesome.
for me is one of the most incredible things. And if you are struggling with addiction, I highly encourage anyone who's listening to this to seek out a 12-step program that's right for them specifically, and whatever it is that they're struggling with, because it's so helpful and it's for fun and it's for free. And that's one place where you can find a community of like-minded people who can provide that kind of mentorship for you, which I think is so great. And then also in terms of like my friendship with my new workout partner, this particular gym is a CrossFit gym. And one of the things that they do is within the gym culture, you kind of spur each other on. It's a competitive type of nature of gym.
Mhm.
And it's sometimes really hard if you're an isolator or you're an introvert like me to stick your hand out and say, hey, I'm Genevieve and I'm new at this gym.
Yeah.
But the act of doing it and forcing myself to do it helps me to, that's kind of like helping yourself. It's like take one step towards me and the other people take the step back. You only need to take one step most of the time,
Yeah.
because people ultimately want connection. It doesn't matter whether you're at the gym, whether you're in an office or wherever you are, that people want friends. Nobody really wants to be isolated, even if they're isolating themselves.
Yeah.
And then also realizing that everybody has something to offer you, I think. Maybe
Mhm.
not everybody, but like the majority of people that you meet, if you give them the time of day, they have something to teach you that you
Mhm.
didn't know. So
Mhm.
if you're open and willing to learn from someone else and not kind of be like, well, I know everything, so you can really get somewhere with your life, I think. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it brings up, thank you for sharing about your recovery in 12 step. Definitely being akin to what we've created with Reach In Now University, with the 11 Triumphs being an 11-step process. Something that we talk very candidly about is that relapse is a part of recovery. And when you talk about trauma recovery specifically, you're at high risk of relapse, without kind of taking this inventory, right, of what activators are in your environment. So the external kind of triggers or factors, and then what goes on internally, that contribute to you maybe having a lapse or a relapse and experiencing, the depression, the anxiety, the stress. So so with your experience in 12-step recovery and with your knowledge about relapse and things like that, how do you protect yourself from relapse?
The thing is with that type of thing is that it can happen at any point to anybody at any time, and that's why it's called a cunning baffling disease in that case. And the thing is with that's specifically what it says, about alcoholism. But the thing is with trauma and grief and stuff, it is cyclical. There is going to be things that are going to trigger us. It's going to bring up stuff. And let me see, in terms of relapse, I do the best I can every day to show up for myself. I
Mhm.
try take it a day at a time. I try to be honest with the people around me. That's why I said earlier, like having people that you can talk to and say, hey, I'm not having a great day. I'm not going to do anything,
Yeah.
but I'm not having a great day. And me having the ability to express that to someone else
Mhm.
is so important. And then the other thing which I think is so important is service and being there for other people and getting out of your own head. It's so underrated how important it is to be there for someone else. And it doesn't mean that you have to like solve the other person's problems, but sometimes just giving a nice, kind word, or somebody's going through something, get them a bunch of flowers or offer to help them with something. I have a friend who struggles with a kind of chronic fatigue, and we had coffee a couple months ago, right in the middle of the pandemic. And he said, I'm struggling with my apartment. I just can't keep it together, and I'm too afraid to have a cleaning service come in. So I was like, my friend, I'm putting everything aside and I'm on my way right now. I'm going to go to the store and get all the cleaning equipment, and I'm going to clean your apartment. And if you have to just keep me company while I do it, I'll do it. And that's how I keep myself from relapsing. And it's not to say that I'm a saint. It's maybe it's selfish in nature, because by doing something for somebody else, I'm helping myself. And then of course you can have cats, which also will keep anyone from relapsing.
Cameo appearance. I love that you brought up service. That is also a part of the 11 Triumphs, is servant leadership. And I think you just hit on some very important parts, that service is a part of that healing process, and again, when I say reach in, because people ask me all the time, why reach in, or what does reach in mean? How do you reach in? And to me, that is kind of like the illustration of what reaching in, or how you can reach in, because as you're kind of evolving and ascending to this place, throughout your healing journey, to where you can turn and say, okay, I'm going to offer service. That is you reaching in and kind of pulling the next man or woman out of the darkness, and by offering maybe mentorship yourself, or offering some type of service, depending upon their need. But the very first part of that you described, Genevieve, is you're relatable. You're offering that point of relation or relationship. And then once somebody feels like, hey, I could relate to what you're going through, then they can open themselves up to maybe sharing what their needs are. Because to me, that is the half the battle, is actually being able to communicate, to verbalize, or to express that you're having a problem. Because you mentioned it before, a lot of us are suffering in silence. And a large part of the being silent is, how do we find those words to express how we're feeling? How do we put that into words that people aren't going to be afraid of? We're not going to scare somebody away. And that takes me
Nobody
back
wants to feel defective. That's the problem, is it makes you feel like you've done something wrong, or that there's something wrong with you, or that you are somehow not as perfect as you want people to perceive you to be. But at the end of the day, sometimes you have to get humble to be happy. You have to you just gotta show, you gotta reach in and show up for yourself. You gotta get honest with yourself. You gotta get honest with the people around you. And more often than not, either people around you, they know what's going on most of the time. Okay, let's get real. They might not be telling you that they know, but they know. So yeah.
And I was going to ask you too, just going back to that first, the first time that you really felt like, okay, I'm gonna come out and say, like, I'm struggling, and going back to just kind of how difficult that may be for somebody like you, who's in the public eye, all over the world. In those moments, was there a particular person or situation that you were able to identify as like, okay, it's safe to say that I'm not okay?
There were so many bottoms, if you will, in sense of like, there was my grief bottom, there was my addiction bottom, there was my depression bottom. There was a lot of bottoms, and there were a lot of things, like I kind of think of these things as kind of like, I like to call them compounded grief, and I'll explain what I mean real quick. Let's just say I stab you in the leg, okay? And I say to you, don't worry about it. Don't do anything. Time will heal all. You'll just leave the knife in your leg, and we don't need to see a doctor. We don't need to get you treatment. Just leave it. It's all going to be fine.
Right.
Okay. how long do you think you're going to be able to walk with that leg like that? Probably not very long before you
Yeah.
trip up the stair and smack your other leg. Okay.
Right.
Then you've got another problem. And then
Mhm.
now you've got two legs that can barely walk. And then you fall down the stairs and then you break an arm. And if
Right.
you think about it, like from trauma and kind
Mhm.
of real pain, if you don't deal with the problem, the initial problem, it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse until you're kind of like broken and you're like, oh, damn, now
Yeah.
I've got a big problem.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I remember specifically when I had my depression kind of bottom, where I was feeling suicidal to the point where, I mean, I've always kind of had a sort of suicidal malaise in the background of my mind, because that's
Mhm.
just where I start my day kind of thing I mentioned
Yeah.
before. Um, but I got to the point where even through my addiction and my recovery of that, I never stopped working.
Mhm.
I always showed up for work. I remember my last Sports Illustrated swimsuit, I was actually 30 days sober at the launch week.
Uh-huh.
And it was one of the most difficult things I ever did, because most people will go into rehab. And I was like, nope, here I am. I've got bills to pay. I've
Yeah.
got people to see, and I've got a life that needs to be dealt with. And I just kept going, kept going, kept going. And when I got to the point with the depression, which was about 2 years after getting sober,
Mhm.
I had lunch with my manager, my long-term manager. He's an amazing person. He's like a second father to me. He's been in my life since I was 19 years old. I
Wow.
said to him, you know what? I need to take a break. And I said to him, I know that this is not something I've ever done before, because even when I've gone on vacation, I'm always available. I always answer my emails. I'm always social mediaing away.
Yeah.
And I got to the point, I said, I have to take a break. I need to
Mhm.
deal with my stuff. And it was the first time in my life where I deleted everything off my phone for a month to start with. I put a thing on my email and I was like, I'm on vacation, whatever. I'm not answering email for a month. I didn't have any social media on my phone, and I just had to take a break,
Yeah.
because I couldn't cope anymore with the pressures of having to show up as being fantastic,
Yeah.
which I didn't feel fantastic,
Yeah.
and then also trying to act normal and go through this kind of like recovery process. It was just too much. And as I said, fortunately, speaking up for me, I had people in my life who really cared about me and who helped me to get the kind of treatment and that kind of thing that I really needed. And it made me realize, if you ask, you get. If you
Yeah.
don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah.
And in this case, it was kind of help that I needed. So
Gosh, I love that. I love your story. It's an incredible story, an incredible journey, and so many great points. The things that will resonate with me from our conversation is being humble to heal. I think that's powerful, and I think just a part of humility is being honest. Having at least one person that you can be honest with and say, I'm not okay. And then of course having the two cats that we've seen some cameo appearances for. I love all of those things. You had mentioned earlier in the podcast that you did some training and became. Can you repeat that? It's called a grief.
So I became a first I became a grief recovery specialist, and
Uh-huh.
then I became an advanced grief recovery specialist during the pandemic.
Uh-huh.
So there's a company called it's called the Grief Recovery Method,
Uh-huh.
and they train people specifically in how to teach people to deal with their grief. So it's a very specific method, and one of the books that I always recommend, because sometimes people just aren't ready to go through the whole process, because it's a
Sure.
7 week process, and also sometimes people just don't want to.
Yeah.
The book is called The Grief Recovery Handbook. It's a purple book. It's written by John James and Russell Friedman, whom I love. John James. He's an amazing person. He's one of the best people I've ever met, probably, and has the most incredible story and why he went about creating the grief recovery program. And I found that I was constantly around people that were grieving, and I didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
Even though I had gone through my own grief of losing my mom at such a young age, and people always opened up to me about it, I still kind of felt like useless in some capacity to actually just listen to them. And the thing that I got the most, which I think anyone can institute into their life today, is to be a heart with ears and just listen to the people around you. You don't have to tell them your grief story just because you've grieved. You can just listen to theirs and say thank you for sharing, and that changes people's lives.
Yeah. Gosh, I love that. And for you, um, you said that you've got the app coming out in about 3 weeks' time, the B2B, and that's an application that deals with physical fitness, correct?
This is going to be physical fitness, and then obviously I'm going to start doing other things. I'm working on a journal that can accompany that, which is very exciting. I'm having a friend of mine in South Africa do the artwork for me for that, which is great.
Awesome.
And yeah, just kind of taking a holistic approach to getting your beach body back, if you will.
Yep.
And I think it's not only is it a great way to, oh, this is one thing I'll say about it. I'm creating programs within the app as well for people who aren't super fit.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the thing that I see online is it's great to see an influencer who can lift, hundreds of pounds, but if you can't do a squat and you can barely stand up, well, I know what it's like to not train for 2 years and then decide that I'm going to now go work out again. And none of the programs that I've seen really cater to that.
Right.
So my first workout is literally like, here you're going to do what I'm calling a pillow sit, which is basically a squat onto the couch. You like sit on the couch and stand up, because in case you have to fall over, you can fall onto the couch or whatever the case may be. So just kind of taking it back to that sort of like the people who can't do any of those things. And yeah.
I love it. I love it. So you got the app. You're also doing some grief work with your network. With the Stuck in a Rut, are you doing any more? Can we expect any new episodes coming out?
I would love to do a new season, but I think it's going to have to depend on what happens with this coronavirus. But I think it would be great to do a new season for sure. Maybe you can come on it.
Hey, I would love to come on the show.
Because I feel like you've got a lot to say.
Oh, I do. Thank you so much. Yeah, no, I would love to come on the show. So just to kind of wrap up, Genevieve, again, thank you so much for joining me today and starting this conversation. I feel like I could literally talk to you all day about this and all of your insights about the subject of just mental health and fitness are just incredible. It's inspiring for me, and I have so many thoughts kind of firing off in my mind. But to wrap, I just want to make sure that your messaging, you feel like what you came on to say is getting across to the audience, and we have an opportunity through the Uni podcast to reach people, and it's my hope and it's my purpose to even if we can just reach one person and change their life or give them another option, to suffering, continuing the suffering in silence. I want to be able to do that, with each and every conversation that we share with the world. And so with that being said, if you can reach one person, if there's one person out there struggling, maybe another young woman that can relate to kind of your story as you shared it, what would you say to that person? What's the message that we want to leave them with?
I would say that don't be deceived by appearances of other people, because it's not always what it seems like it is. And you're probably doing better than you think you're doing.
Yeah.
And then also, love yourself enough to do what's best for you. If I have a cat, I'm not going to just give the cat treats all the time because that's what the cat wants. I give the cat the right food and the toys it needs to play with. And it's the same with your physical and mental health. Like, self-care isn't bubble baths. Self-care is going to a therapist and going to the gym sometimes, or sometimes self-care is sitting down and paying the bills you've been avoiding paying. Like, that is self-care. Taking care of who you are and building a future for yourself. So that's my message.
Thank you again so much for coming on and sharing your story, sharing your message. I am certain that you've changed a lot of lives today with our conversation. You certainly changed mine. So thank
Thank you
you
so
again.
much for giving me the opportunity, Bianca, and it was amazing to meet you as well.
Likewise, thank you so much, and we'll hopefully talk again.
Yes, in my bed next time.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
Bye.
All right, bye bye. You have a good one.